Live, a 22 News Decision 2014 debate with Massachusetts Democratic Gubernatorial candidates Donald Berwick, Martha Coakley, and Stephen Grossman. And now, here's Barry Krieger.
And welcome to the 22 News debate among the candidates seeking your vote for governor in the September 9th Democratic primary, which is now less than 2 weeks away. Our participants tonight are Dr. Don Berwick, State Treasurer Steve Grossman, and State Attorney General Martha Coakley. We will begin with a 1-minute opening statement from each candidate, beginning with Martha Coakley.
Thank you very much. Of course, we all have in our thoughts and prayers the pilot that we know is missing, and appreciate that for the family that we're thinking of him and his family. My name is Martha Coakley. I'm the Attorney General of Massachusetts. I'm delighted to be with you all here tonight, and I particularly appreciate, as you do, that Massachusetts has some good choices ahead. I believe that we can turn this economy around for everybody by following the leadership of Governor Patrick and his investment in innovation and education and infrastructure. And I believe we have the opportunity now to make sure that every part of Massachusetts, not just Boston and Cambridge, but every part of Massachusetts has the opportunity to take part in getting out of the worst recession we've seen in a while. I know, having grown up in Berkshire County in North Adams, that it's important that we invest in our schools, our workforce, and that we make sure that as we bring businesses here, we have the workforce available to do that. We can do that here in Massachusetts. Thank you.
And Steve Grossman, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and good evening to all my friends here in Western Massachusetts. I've been a proven jobs creator all my life. I've had the privilege of running a fourth-generation family business, which my grandfather, an immigrant from Russia, started in 1910. He came to Springfield. He came to a Springfield company, and he said, "If you help put me in business, I'll become your biggest customer someday." They said yes, and that's exactly what happened. I've created jobs throughout 35 years in business, and when I had the privilege of becoming Treasurer of the Commonwealth, I began to create jobs as our treasurer. Brought money back, hundreds of millions of dollars back from overseas banks, and put it into local banks. 7 banks here in Western Massachusetts, which have made hundreds of loans, particularly to businesses owned by women, people of color, immigrants, and veterans. Job creation is what I've been all about. Job creation is what we need here in Western Massachusetts. I look forward to doing that as your next governor, building on a phenomenal foundation that our governor has created. Thank you so much. Look forward to this evening.
Don Berwick, your opening remarks, please.
Thanks. I'm Don Berwick, and I'm asking for your support on September 9th. Massachusetts has big problems, and I'm running for governor to solve them. Solving big problems has been my work throughout my whole career as a doctor and as an executive. I welcome big goals. When I set the goal of saving 100,000 lives by making healthcare safer, people said it was impossible. But in 18 months, we mobilized nearly every hospital in America, and we did it. People in Massachusetts are worried. Income inequality is eroding our futures. Communities are getting left out. Too many families are struggling to make ends meet. It's unwise, it's unfair, and it's got to stop. I am not a politician. I am a problem solver, and I want to bring those skills to the corner office. We cannot afford politics as usual. We need a new direction, real solutions to make an economy and a Commonwealth that works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, all 3 candidates. We do have a panel of Western Massachusetts journalists who will be asking the questions tonight. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the very same question, and we ask for that we are tight for time, and we ask you to be fair and stay within your allotted times. Our panel tonight: 22 News I-Team reporter Ryan Walsh, New England Public Radio reporter Susan Kaplan, Mass Live and Republican reporter Robert Rizzuto, and 22 News I-Team reporter and anchor Laura Hutchinson. Again, I would like to caution the candidates to stay within your 1 minute of allotted time. Laura Hutchinson will pose the first question to Steve Grossman.
Mr. Grossman, our first question tonight comes from our 22 News viewers, and it's all about taxes. Patricia from Holyoke emailed us wanting to know what plans, if any, you have to lower her property taxes. And Tom from Westfield asked about lowering the sales tax. Also, we want to know, will you take a no new taxes pledge? And if not, what type of tax increases would you support?
So as I said earlier, I'm a jobs creator and I'm a builder, and I believe that investing for the future is what the next governor needs to be all about, leading the state over these next 4 years. There are 4 ways in which to grow the economy. One is to grow it dynamically, and I've said that I want to create 75 to 100,000 new jobs. Second source of revenue is to create public-private partnerships, challenge the business community to invest for the future, things like vocational technical education and things like 5,000 summer internships for all of our college students. A third way to find the resources to invest in our future is to save money. I've done that as treasurer, saving tens of millions of dollars. And finally, I won't take revenue off the table. But if we decide to raise revenue, what I promise the people of Massachusetts that I'll do is to make sure that the tax code is far fairer than it's been in the past. What you do is to hold harmless low and middle income families using exemptions, the property tax circuit breaker, and the earned income tax credit.
And
that's my
time.
plan for the future.
Dr. Berwick, you have 1 minute to answer the same question.
Job growth does count, and we're going to invest in job growth if I'm governor, with transportation investments, better education, smart growth in communities, an innovation economy, and fair wages for workers. But we do need revenue sources. The best possible source of revenue is health care reform. Health care is 42% of our state budget. At least 30% of it is waste. Half that waste is paperwork. That's one of the reasons I stand for single-payer health care. I'm the only candidate standing for it. It's a way to get money back for public uses and will help create jobs in the private sector. We also need to close tax loopholes and exemptions. There are far too many of them. They've been offered in return for job creation, but the job creation is not materialized in all cases, even in many cases. And so we're going to have clawback provisions, and if there's a loophole there, we're going to make sure jobs are created, and we're going to reset to zero for loopholes that don't. And I'm for fair taxation. We need a tax system in the Commonwealth in which people at high levels of income pay a higher income tax rate and people at lower levels of income pay a lower rate.
Martha Coakley.
So unfortunately, one thing that's happened is Wall Street took our money, gambled with it, lost it. And we are still digging out of that recession. We have people who've lost their homes. Their homes have lost value. Cities and towns are actually struggling with a lower return on property taxes because of that. I hope that as we turn this economy around for everybody, we will see people's ability to grow, equity in their cities and towns. And frankly, we depend upon that tax right now for schools, for police, for fire. I actually think that the state has to play a bigger role and be a better partner, particularly to make sure that communities are treated fairly in terms of the Chapter 70 foundation budget for schools, but making sure that communities have the resources they need. So at the moment, I am not interested in looking at real estate taxes, but as I come in as governor, I'm going to look at the revenues we have. I'm going to look at priorities like education and make sure our cities and towns have what they need, and we'll have to review that as we move forward.
Robert Rizzuto will begin our second round of questioning, and the first candidate your question will be directed toward will be Dr. Berwick.
Thank you, Barry. With the ballot measure to repeat the state's casino law pending in November, a lot of people are wondering what would actually happen if the entire 2011 Expanded Gaming Act were to be nullified. Republican Charlie Baker has said that he'd seek what he called a legislative solution to allow the MGM Springfield project to proceed, even if the entire law was thrown out. So my question is, would you take a similar stance if elected and the casino repeal passes? And regardless from your stance on that, how would you address the $73 million in casino money that's already factored into the 2015 fiscal year budget?
I'm the only candidate for governor opposed to casinos and favoring the repeal initiative. That's because I've looked at the data. There are 39 states with casinos. We know what they do. Casinos kill jobs. Listen to me. Casinos destroy communities. They shutter small businesses. They cause increases in public safety problems, DUI, petty crime. They're predators on the poor. Casinos add gambling addiction, which is a dreaded problem, and we already have underfunding of mental health services in this Commonwealth. So I have every respect for those who think casinos will do good. They will not. They will harm. And I can only, as a responsible candidate for office, I can say we must oppose them. In terms of the alleged increases to state revenue, when states have studied revenue, there's actually net revenue losses, certainly in the second or third year by the time casinos are mature, because states have to put more money into public safety and mental health care. This is a loss for communities. And you got to think big picture. Overall, the states that have looked at this have found that casinos do not add to state revenue net. They cost state revenue. They do not add. And the head of the Mass Taxpayers Association has said that casinos will not add.
And
Thank
that's
you.
time, sir. Martha Coakley, same question.
And I've always felt that casinos would not be the first place I would go for economic development. I understand that there are advantages, but there are also disadvantages. It's why, after the legislature passed this particular bill, or while we were looking to pass it, while they were looking to pass it, we worked with them to make sure that we had a money laundering statute, for instance, and that we constructed a gaming commission that was going to be diligent and who would get the licenses and make sure that we would mitigate the harm to consumers. I don't believe in internet gaming, for instance. We have to have good consumer protections if we move forward on this. And so we did look at local control in this bill, and some communities said they wanted it, some did not. I understand that Springfield has voted for it. What I'd like to do is see what happens. There'll be a lot of debate back and forth, I think, on whether there's a repeal or not. I have said I will not vote to repeal it, and I'd like to see, if there is a repeal, what happens to those voters in Springfield and whether there's a way to still accommodate that. But I think it's a little premature.
Mr. Grossman, your answer.
So I have supported the expansion of casino gambling in Massachusetts. The most authoritative organization in the state that studied this issue, the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, said that it would create 15,000 jobs and $300 million of additional revenue. If you raise $300 million of additional revenue, that would fully fund universal pre-K education for every one of our 25,000 children who are left behind, many of them right here in Hampden County. I believe that if the casino bill does not remain the law of the Commonwealth, and I'll vote to keep it on the ballot, I will not vote to repeal it, I would not support and I would not file legislation to allow one casino in and of itself. I think the will of the people is important here. If the people of Massachusetts decide in this ballot question on the 4th of November that they do not want casinos, then I think we have to respect the will of the people. To me, that's what democracy is all about.
Our next question comes from Susan Kaplan. It will be directed toward Martha Coakley.
Attorney General Coakley, as we all know, the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families has come under criticism and scrutiny following high-profile tragedies like the death of Jeremiah Oliver. Which specific changes that have been made so far by the Patrick administration do you approve of, and can you give us some specific examples of what you would do differently and how you would pay for it?
Sure. Well, some changes in terms of lowering caseload and better communication to make sure some of the things that we've seen happen, unfortunately for Jeremiah Oliver, in some of the other terrific cases that frankly we've seen for a long time, we need to do better. And I have said for a long time, having worked in a child abuse unit since the 80s, and I have heard governors, both Republican and Democrat, say for the commissioners under them that they make two mistakes in DCF, then Department of Social Services. We leave children in and we take them out. And so we need to do better in how we make those calls on whether children will be safe in families where there is abuse or suspected abuse. I think we should have a particular division within the Department of Child and Families whose only responsibility is safety of the children. If there's a question on serious physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, that worker should follow that child. I think we can do that even under the existing budget and get much better results across a range of cases.
Steve Grossman.
So the Patrick administration has made some changes. They put iPads in the hands of the social workers. That's a good thing for better communication. I'm pleased that the legislature put some significant money to work to hire more social workers. I note that my dear friend and supporter Stan Rosenberg, the next Senate president, is in the House tonight, and he supported that and led that effort. But the social workers are handling too many cases, and that's the biggest challenge. We've cut funding by $100 million over the past 5 years for DCF. That has resulted in caseloads that are not 15, not 18, but in some cases 23 or 24. That's wrong. That's unacceptable. So we've got many changes we need to make. We need to bring more resources back in, better trained social workers, better oversight, better managers. Look, I'm a leader. I'm somebody who understands how to run complex organizations. I've demonstrated that I understand how to run Treasury as a leader in a very complex way. And as governor, this will be one of my top priorities. We've got to fix this problem. It's long overdue.
The final candidate to answer this question is Dr. Berwick.
This is a case in point of the difference between political leadership and managerial leadership. I've been a manager and executive for 30 years. I started a small organization and grew it to worldwide impact. I'm not a politician. I am a manager, and I believe the chief executive job in this Commonwealth is the job of a manager. DCF needs many of the remedies that Governor Patrick has now put in and more. New resources, better data systems, buoyancy for the workforce. If you demoralize a workforce, they can't do their jobs. A good leader helps the workforce achieve pride and joy in their work, the kind of efforts that I've engaged in for my whole career. We need much better cooperation among state agencies. It's a management failure when agencies that should cooperate, as in the case of the tragedy with Jeremiah Oliver, do not cooperate. We need an executive in that corner office who sets a new direction toward proper management of state government and not politicizing systems and choices that really need to focus on the needs of people who need help.
Our next question will be posed by 22 News I-Team reporter Ryan Walsh. It'll be directed first at Steve Grossman.
We have another viewer question, and this was a popular topic amongst our viewers. They want to know about the welfare system. EBT cards, they use a cash system where $25 million a month is taken out at ATMs with what appears to be little oversight of how it's actually spent. Dottie from Westfield wants to know what your plans are for addressing welfare fraud to ensure our taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately.
So this is not just what my plan is. It's something I've actually addressed, because while I don't oversee the Department of Transitional Assistance as State Treasurer, I did oversee the procurement of the new technology. And I wrote right into the procurement that I want to make sure that we have the best technology and the best tools and best resources to rein in, as you put it, the waste, fraud, and abuse that takes place. If merchants, if lottery agents, if anybody is trading illegally on EBT cards, we can now figure that out to a greater extent than we've ever been before, rein that in and go after those people and prosecute them if need be. But look, we are a compassionate society. We are a commonwealth. There are 800,000 people on food stamps as we're talking this evening. There are thousands and thousands of people who desperately need support. So I believe that it's important to make sure that anybody who needs help, who needs support, in a society that is defined in Massachusetts by social and economic justice, should have that support. Use the technology right, put the best people in place, but make sure you're a compassionate society as much as anything else.
Don Berwick, you are next.
I have no patience with fraud and abuse. When I was running Medicare and Medicaid for President Obama, we had massive new efforts to catch fraud in Medicare and Medicaid and added billions of dollars back to the public treasury by catching people that were being deceptive. On the other hand, we do have 230,000 kids in this Commonwealth with food insecurity, families that are suffering, and we have to be very careful not to put bureaucratic barriers in the way of compassionate public policy. But if you want to see fraud, influence that shouldn't be there, look bigger. Look at the influence of lobbyists in our state now. Look at what's happening in the casino debate. Casinos will hurt our communities, and instead big money is coming in to convince communities to do things that will only help big money grow and not help people who really need the help. Look at the influence of monopoly behaviors, such as the Partners healthcare system right now, a great system, but exercising its influence to hurt us. That's not fraud, but it is not proper respect for the public treasury or private resources, and that's where we need to look if we really want to get inappropriate uses of money out of our system.
Ms. Coakley, you're next.
So it certainly is our responsibility at the government level, and I've done this as Attorney General, making sure that the dollars that we want to spend go where they're supposed to go. I came in as Attorney General with the Big Dig case with civil and criminal and federal and state claims overruns, cost overruns, started under a Republican administration. Lesson I learned from that was that when stimulus money was coming into the state in the recession, we worked with the Inspector General and with the auditor and with the departments to make sure that the dollars that were going where they were supposed to go actually did. And you don't read the headlines about what we prevented, but that stimulus money went everywhere it was supposed to go during that time period. We're the agency that did prosecute convenience stores for fraud and abuse around EBT cards. We'll continue to do that and make sure that dollars go where they should go. We can do that in this state.
Our next question comes from 22 News I-Team reporter Laura Hutchinson. It will be directed toward Dr. Berwick.
Thank you. Dr. Berwick, this is another viewer question tonight. Robert from Chicopee emailed us wanting us to ask you about getting homeless families out of hotels. The State Department of Housing and Community Development pledged to get the families all out by June of this year, but that month came and went, and there are still more than 2,000 families in there right now. And that's a number that I got today. There are 2,000 families staying in motels tonight. Taxpayers have spent $56 million on this program since 2009. Our question for you is, if you're governor, how much longer would these families need to live in the motels before there's a solution that works for everyone?
Homelessness is a plague in our Commonwealth. It's gotten worse, not better. I was in Holyoke recently at a Latino festival, and I remember passing a woman as 5 young children ran in front of me, and an elderly woman walked behind them. I asked who she was. She was their grandmother. I said, "How are things going?" She said, "Not too well." She's about to be evicted from her home and become homeless. I asked her what she's going to do. She said, "Hope." We have 19,000 people chronically homeless, 19,000 people without homes in this Commonwealth, 4,600 families. We've been dealing with it wrong. We've cut our state housing voucher program at exactly the time when it needs to be increased. It costs $4,000 a month, more or less, to have someone in a motel room. That's not the way to secure housing as a human right. For a voucher, approximately $1,200 per voucher, we can get these families and individuals back into the housing market, and I will commit to 20,000 housing vouchers in our Commonwealth as governor. That's where we used to be. That's where we need to go now. We can end chronic homelessness. It's been done. We know how to do that, and I will do that as governor. I promise.
Arthur Coakley, you are next.
Thank you. So I agree with Dr. Berwick. This is a disgrace in many respects, and I think what was begun as a short-term solution, frankly, hasn't been a good one. We have families and kids who are moved around from school to school. There's no stability. It's not a good way to deal with this problem short-term or long-term. And we do need to provide more vouchers in the short run, but also to plan moving forward on clean, affordable housing and look at some of the roots of homelessness to make sure that families who have been evicted, who are suffering a short-term problem, get some help to get back on their feet and invest in a home or be able to rent. And for those who are homeless due to mental health issues or addiction issues that I'm assuming we're going to talk about tonight also, we need to deal with the substance abuse, the mental health issues, make sure we get them help and give them a safe place to live in the short run and try and provide longer term housing. I think we all agree the hotels are not a good idea, they're not cost effective, and we need to find a better solution very quickly.
Steve Grossman.
Let's talk about jobs and the relationship between jobs and homelessness. People who are making minimum wage, if they're working at all, and we have close to 200,000 people in Massachusetts this evening who are not working, who are unemployed, roughly the same number who are working perhaps half-time. So we need to create jobs, and I'm pleased that the legislature moved the minimum wage from $8 an hour over the next few years up to $11 an hour. That's going to help a little bit. But even at $11 an hour, you're still at the poverty level. You're still not making ends meet. The legislature just recently passed and the governor signed a housing bond bill. We need to create more high-quality, affordable housing for those men and women and their children who are living in motels. And, of course, since the federal government was the one who cut the federal voucher program, and we haven't stepped in adequately to fill that gap, we need to find the way to do that. So it's obvious that we have to do something to create more affordable housing, better quality housing, and pay for it and underwrite it to give people the quality of life they deserve and they need.
Robert Rizzuto, you have the next question. It will be directed toward Attorney General Martha Coakley.
Thank you, Barry. The issue of illegal immigration is always a contentious one, and although the Commonwealth is a couple thousand miles away from the Mexican border where many illegal entries take place, Massachusetts is often in the spotlight when it comes to this topic. Governor Deval Patrick has supported temporarily housing unaccompanied migrant youth here in Massachusetts. He has supported the DREAM Act, which is in-state tuition for some youths who are here illegally. And he initially opposed the Federal Secure Communities Program, which requires local law enforcement to coordinate with federal law enforcement about a suspect's potential immigration status. As governor, where is your personal limitation as far as the resources and opportunities that you would provide to people whose immigration status is technically unlawful?
Well, we know that I had hoped that by now we would have a federal solution for many of the issues that all the states face. And you see what's happened now. States are dealing in a patchwork way with the real issue of many families who've been here now, starting a second generation, they are working, they are paying taxes, their kids are going to school. They want to be part of the future of Massachusetts. And yet, we have to deal with the lack of a federal solution to what is a federal problem. And so certainly I have supported the DREAM Act. I support the governor's in-state tuition. I think that makes sense when we are investing in people who are here and giving them an opportunity to get on that economic ladder, to get a good education, to move ahead. I do believe, and I have said this, I have been against in the past driver's license, but we have to face the issue, and I'm looking at what other states do. I've said that I would appoint a director of immigrant and community safety to help me deal with what we're doing in Massachusetts, our federal partners, and looking at how we deal with these issues that other states have dealt with.
And that's time. Steve Grossman.
But Martha, you haven't supported driver's licenses for all immigrants, and the fact is that we don't want anybody driving on our streets or our roads without a driver's education, without a test, without a driver's license, without insurance. That's bad for all of us. It's a public safety issue. The best you've been able to say, Martha, is that you support potential access to driver's licenses. I support driver's licenses for all immigrants as a public safety issue. You supported secure communities. I've never supported secure communities. It's made us more insecure. More than 50% of the people we have deported are people who have no criminal record. We're tearing families apart. And the issue of in-state tuition for undocumented people, for immigrants, I've supported that for many years, even though it never passed the legislature, because it's the right thing to do. Every one of those young people who goes to college is going to be a resource who's going to help build the economy of Western Massachusetts and of this whole Commonwealth. So the big difference between myself and the Attorney General on these three key issues.
Don Berg, you'll complete this round of questions.
Well, you're hearing the bickering, politics as usual, back and forth, back and forth. You change your mind. No, you didn't. We need a new direction. We need firm commitment to the basic values of human rights and social justice and equality. My belief about the undocumented people who are here is very clear. There's no such thing as an illegal person. Yes, they should have driver's licenses. Yes, they should have access to in-state tuition. Yes, we need to protect them against the exploitation in the underground economy. And one of my endorsers, Senator Jamie Eldridge, is a sponsor of the Trust Act, and we need the Trust Act. And I commend Mayor Curtatone and Mayor Walsh now for moving toward Trust Act implementation in their municipalities. But what we really need here is a new direction of leadership. Stop reading the polls. Stop looking at the winds of public opinion. Instead, take a stand. Take a stand in favor of human rights, and that's going to take new kind of leadership in this Commonwealth, and that's what I want to bring here.
And I thank very much the candidates for staying with their times. This does complete our first round of questions tonight. Our panel of journalists will pose more questions to the candidates, including questions emailed to us from our viewers using our 22 News Reported feature. The 22 News Democratic Gubernatorial Candidates Debate continues in just a few moments.
Oh, it's live on TV and it's streamed.
Right, so that means that it's immediately accessible after the...
1 minute! I'm guessing they will capture it.
Yes. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1.
And welcome back to our live candidates debate here on 22 News. Our panel of journalists posing questions to the three Democrats vying for your vote in the September 9th primary. We begin our second round of questioning with NPR's New England Public Radio's Susan Kaplan, first addressing Steve Grossman.
Thanks, Barry. Treasurer Grossman, Springfield has just experienced its 10th murder of the year. The city has a new police commissioner, John Barbieri, and he's a supporter of C3 policing as a model to reduce gang violence. Do you support it? Do you think it's a model for urban communities in other parts of the Commonwealth? And what policy do you propose to reduce violence and to improve the relationship between law enforcement and the community?
So I'm not sure I exactly understood the question, the beginning of the question, so I'm going to fall back on some advice my father once gave me, which is when you don't know the answer to a question, don't make one up on the earlier part of it. But let me tell you what I feel strongly, and this is a lesson I think we learned from Ferguson, Missouri. When the community does not have a strong voice at the table, bad things happen. When you don't have enough leadership from the community and the community's not fully engaged in the kind of trusting relationship with the police, then we don't solve crimes. I believe also, in addition to all those things, I believe that we have to significantly change the way we go about our gun policy. I disagree completely with Martha Coakley. I support limiting gun sales. Limiting gun sales save lives. We lost 264 lives in 2011 in Massachusetts because of gun-related fatalities. I'm not satisfied, and I think limiting gun sales and clean and smart gun technology and a regional task force is going to help a lot to help build that relationship of trust.
Don Berwick, you have 60 seconds.
Again, you hear more of the same. I am sure Attorney General Coakley does not want guns on our streets. Springfield is a city in distress. It's in distress from injustice, from the economic downturn that is not recovered from. It's trying hard, but it needs help. The public safety force in Springfield since the early 2000s has gone from 1,100 people down to 700. The last thing Springfield needs, by the way, is casinos right now to add to public safety issues. We can work on safer communities, but that's going to have to go upstream to the root causes of this problem. I am a doctor. I look at the causes, and the causes are injustice and inequality, residual racism in our society. It's time to end it. We can do that. I've been a change agent for my whole life. What you do is you find examples of programs that work, and then you bring them in and make them work locally. I saw a wonderful example on gang violence, the UTEC program in Lowell. We can get to work. We're going to have to focus back on basic values: justice, equality, opportunity for everybody. That's the solution.
Martha Coakley.
So I've worked in law enforcement for a long period of time, and I've seen times when we've done better and when we've done worse. When we cut funding for police and training, when we cut back on the services that we provide for kids in school, we do see an increase in crime. And certainly some of the things we know that work are making sure, and I agree with the treasurer, that having that trust in your police department is crucial. That when you have a police department that is trained, that represents the community it serves, and has the communication that we saw absent in Ferguson, you cut down on some of the problems that you see. And I've heard Dr. Berwick say this, that we believe in community policing, not combat policing. It's totally right. And so as we have just passed a gun bill in Massachusetts that will seek to address issues around domestic violence, illegal guns on our street, we still have to work to make sure that people are willing to come forward to the police if they have been victimized or they're threatened, and that we have district attorneys and others who will act appropriately when those homicides occur.
Our next question comes from Ryan Walsh. It will be directed first toward Don Berwick.
This is another viewer question, and this is a hot topic around here. Matt from Chesterfield wanted to know where you stand on the Kinder Morgan, Tennessee natural gas pipeline that's proposed across parts of Berkshire, Hampshire, Franklin, and Worcester counties. Do you support it, or would you use your power to block some of the permits that they'd need to put it in?
I do not support Kinder Morgan, and I was the first candidate to take that position. It's because it's very unconvincing that we need that immense investment in new natural gas infrastructure, billions of dollars, at a time when we don't even have a plan for the future of either gas supply or the overall approach to fossil fuels and energy use in the Commonwealth. But we can have a great future. I think we can aim to be the first state that's carbon neutral, not in my tenure, but we can aim in that direction. That means working on conservation and energy efficiency, a smart grid, energy efficient appliances. We need to build our clean energy industry and grow solar, wind, and hydroelectric power. They're growing jobs. 80,000 clean energy jobs in the state. 5,500 firms grew 24% in the past in 2 years. And we need to invest in wind power. We have 5 gigawatts of wind offshore. That leaves fossil fuels. We need to get on it and off it as fast as we can. If a governor, we will have a plan for minimizing the possible use of natural gas as we find our way to a carbon-free economy.
And the same question to Martha Coakley.
So I'm smiling because I think I know Matt from Chesterfield, and I know he would ask that question. And so certainly we have made some progress in moving to a clean and an affordable future. We're not there yet, so we do need bridge fuels to make sure that we can have clean, cost-effective energy. I do not, however, support this particular proposal. As I have learned about it, and I wanted to take a look at what the proposal was, I don't think this is the right proposal for Massachusetts at this time. But I do think that what we need to do is continue to talk to our advocates and our energy folks. Following the lead, I think that Governor Patrick has given us with the Green Communities Act and the investments we've made in moving forward. We obviously need those solutions. I will be a governor who will bring everybody to the table to say, how do we move forward in energy, keep our costs down, and make sure we meet those 2020 and 2050 goals of clean energy?
Steve Grossman, you're next.
So I, too, have expressed deep concern about this project. We are now losing, because of our old natural gas pipelines and pipes, we're losing 30% to 40% of our natural gas. That's increasing the rates for our ratepayers, many of whom can't afford that. In addition, we're releasing significant amounts of methane into the environment, far more poisonous than anything else. So this is right now the wrong plan. I cannot support this and will not support this. But I also understand, and we also understand, that we're going to take 84 megawatts of power off the grid in a very short period of time, and we have to be able to replace that because we have to be able to heat our homes and grow our businesses and create jobs and economic opportunity. So the obvious route to go is solar and wind and Canadian hydro in some kind of a mix that works for us long term. Natural gas is going to be a bridge fuel for a long time to come. 68% of our energy comes from natural gas. But if we can see it as a bridge fuel and a way to wean ourselves away from that, and this governor has really built a foundation on which the next governor can create opportunities for growth.
Our next question comes from Laura Hutchinson. It will be directed toward, first, Martha Coakley.
Paul from Ludlow wants to know tonight if, as governor, you'd support a proposal to add a high-speed commuter rail from Springfield to Boston. Also on transportation, if you're elected governor, can you name one transportation project specifically, aside from the I-91 viaduct reconstruction project, that you want to pursue here in Western Massachusetts?
Well, thank you, Paul, for that question. I know the issue of transportation here, and particularly within cities, not just across the state or north, as we're talking about the Vermonter route, is really important for people who want to live outside a city and work there, or to get from city to city. So I do believe that we have not had regional equity in the investments we've made in infrastructure, which is why one of the proposals I unfolded today was to provide for, within 13 different regional economic areas, $500 million over the next 10 years, much of which would go towards improving that infrastructure. I know that that viaduct does need help. I know that certainly all of our roads and bridges need to be replaced. We've let them go across the Commonwealth. And I would certainly look forward to working with Paul and others in the area about what those priorities should be in investing, not just in keeping our roads and bridges, but where new transportation priorities should come in.
Steve Grossman.
So I do support high-speed rail from Springfield to Boston, and the best model of how this can work and create jobs, which is really what this is all about, is what happened between Boston and Worcester. Over these last 8 or 10 years, 20 trains go back and forth to Worcester from Boston every day. People commute, and they reverse commute. Thousands of jobs have resulted. The same thing can happen here. And because of what we're doing at Union Station here, that dream is going to become a reality. The North-South link, the Knowledge Corridor link from Vermont down to Connecticut, is also critical. And the good news is the federal government is putting up $75 million of the $115 million. State will have to put up $40 million. but that is a dramatic improvement and a real strong statement. The fact that there will be a terminal right there in Holyoke is something that the residents of Holyoke and Hampden County can rely on as giving them 21st century high-quality transportation to create jobs and economic opportunity and leave no town and no city behind.
Don Berwick.
Yes, we need to complete the Knowledge Corridor link to Connecticut and I hope north of Springfield, and I've looked with very great interest at east-west connections. I think a big issue out here is regional transit authorities, though. I remember meeting a woman in Greenfield, a dignified lady who was in near tears. She can't get home from work because the regional transit authority shuts down at 7 and her job ends at 9. And we need regional equity. I'm fully committed to that as governor. But the question is, how did we get here? $15 billion behind in state of good repair in our transportation system. Long waits, still unrequited hope for links like we're talking about, including the link in the South Shore connection. This is politicians doing what they do, talking and talking, promising and not delivering. We need a new direction. We're going to need real commitments here. And again, someone in that corner office that really understands what it is to manage progress directly, promptly on behalf of the communities they serve. We haven't had enough of that.
Our next question comes from Robert Rizzuto. It will be directed towards Steve Grossman first.
Well, the issue of opioid addiction has gained increasing attention over the past year with heroin overdoses and drug-related incidents and arrests skyrocketing. The legislature has passed a comprehensive piece of legislation which in part requires insurance companies to cover 14-day inpatient stay for people who are addicted as a means of treatment. Critics on one side say that 14 days is not enough, and some insurance companies are arguing they shouldn't be required to cover this, and they're denying science-based evidence. Basically, going forward, what is, in your eyes, what is the state's role in addressing not just this crisis, but the next substance abuse-related crisis that's bound to come down the road?
Look, we have a crisis. I don't know that there's a person in this audience who doesn't know someone who hasn't been touched personally by the opioid epidemic, in some cases in a very tragic way. And you have probably the best sheriff in the state and possibly the best sheriff in the country who has made it his business to deal with this in a very, very effective manner. As governor, within the first month, I will halt all new prison construction because we are incarcerating thousands of low-level drug offenders. In some cases, overwhelmingly, I should say, African American, Latino, people of color. By suspending prison construction and saving $1 billion, that money should go into detox beds, step-down units, recovery units, community-based care, residential care. For a fraction of that $1 billion, we can save that money. We can save and reclaim lives. That's what this is all about. We need to treat the opioid epidemic as a healthcare crisis and not as a criminal justice crisis. So that's where I would start and make a clean break with the past.
Our next answer will come from Don Berwick.
I've pledged as part of my platform for governor that we will seek a 50% reduction in substance abuse and suicide in the Commonwealth in the first 5 years. I know how to do that. I've seen programs that work, and I promise we will get to work on it. We've been going the other way. The status quo hasn't been working. We've undercut resources for mental health services, for substance abuse treatment. I'm told that in Franklin County there's not a single rehab bed. This is a status quo concession to an epidemic that our political leaders have been turning their backs on far too much. I've seen it as a doctor. I've seen it as I've campaigned around this state. And I must say, why, if you care about an epidemic of substance abuse, would you possibly stand up for the addition of casinos to our Commonwealth, which will definitely increase gambling addiction? And if you don't think gambling addiction is as bad as drug abuse, then you got to meet a gambling addict and see what it does to families. This is the politics of convenience. Instead of looking at what the community and the public really need, we need investment, commitment, and goals.
Martha Coakley.
So a few weeks ago, I sat with some moms in Somerville and Medford, about 15 women, all of whom had adult addicted children to heroin, to OxyContin. Some of them had overdosed and some of them had died. Some of them were in prison. And the moms said to me, I don't know whether it's worse when my son is in prison or when I know he's going to get out, because although he's clean when he comes out, he may not be able to stay clean. It is a heart-wrenching thing to listen to parents. One woman said, my husband and I did everything right with our kids. Sports, we had lunch, we had dinner together. Sports injury, child had a prescription for Percocet, and for 5 years, she said, I had no idea that he had become a heroin addict. the heartrending price we have paid by not, with all due respect, Dr. Berwick, dealing with doctors and overprescription, and now providing for the beds that we need, more drug courts, ways to keep people out of trouble, but if they do get into trouble in the criminal justice system, providing much more rehabilitation.
Our next question comes from Susan Kaplan, directed first toward Don Berwick.
Dr. Berwick, and by the way, this question is to all of you about the issue of judgment. So while I'll be asking you a question, there are specifics for everybody, so listen up. Okay, Dr. Berwick, those who choose to run in high-profile campaigns with little hope of winning are often called spoilers. So why should Democrats who don't support you think otherwise? Treasurer Grossman, while your poll numbers are improving, until now you've been significantly behind Attorney General Coakley. Explain to voters why you haven't been able to make the race closer up until now, and when did you decide to use $200,000 of your own money for last-minute TV ads? And Attorney General Coakley, your former employee, Maura Healey, this week made public critical comments about one of your settlements in civil litigation with a lobbying group. Despite your forthright rebuttals, this isn't your first high-profile race. Why shouldn't voters question your political acumen?
That first is Don Berwick.
Well, let me be really clear. I intend to win this race. We have a remarkable field force out there, volunteers mobilized all over this state. We have these debates, which are giving us a chance to make a case to a public that hasn't been paying attention till now. Why would they? We have radio and TV ads, of course, going up, but we also have the best platform. I'm the most progressive candidate in this election. As I've gone all over the state, this state is full of people who might not call themselves progressives, but they sure share progressive instincts. They want social justice, they want equality, they want compassion in government, and they are sick and tired of politics as usual. They want a new direction. And so I have every hope that I can win this election. I'm the only one that hasn't lost a statewide election. There are my opponents have run 10 races for 6 offices. They're running race after race after race. I'm in this to help the Commonwealth with a set of skills that I developed outside the political sphere, and I am proud to stand on that, and I'm ready to offer that to the Commonwealth, and I think the Commonwealth is going to accept it.
Martha Coakley, you're next.
Sure. So with all due respect to those who criticize a particular case without access to all the facts and the judgment we've had, I stand on my judgment in that particular case. We made the right call. We got $100,000 back to a children's hospital that would not have gotten it otherwise. But what I will stand on my judgment on, standing up to Wall Street, challenging the Defense of Marriage Act, making sure we bring back insurance for overcharging on motorcycle or home insurance, standing up to big utilities who overcharge. And my judgment, I believe, although it's not perfect, nobody up here is, I'm transparent about it. I explain why I've done what I've done, and that's been true as I served as district attorney with many high-profile and controversial cases. As Attorney General, we're out there fighting every single day. That case is one of several hundred that have come across my desk in the last 8 years. We make a call as we see it. I stand by that decision. I think voters will see my judgment in that area makes me a very good candidate for governor.
Steve Grossman.
But I think it's instructive that Maura Healey, your right-hand person, questioned your judgment on a case where $270,000 of money from a charity, Franciscan Hospital for Children, wound up in the hands of lobbyists, and one commentator, Greg Sullivan, the former Inspector General of the Commonwealth, said it's like robbing a bank and letting 2/3 of the money stay with the robbers. So I think it's a serious issue of judgment, and I think it's legitimate that Maura Healey and Bill Galvin, the Secretary of State, have raised the issue. You asked about my polling numbers. Look, I think my polling numbers are increasing dramatically because of what I stand for and what I bring to this race. I'm the only person in this Democratic field who is a proven jobs creator in the private sector, and that's what we need. That's the most important thing we need. When you have 10% unemployment in some of our most important Western Mass cities, being a proven jobs creator matters. And being the person who has stood up and said, we need universal pre-K education for every one of our 25,000 children. So I'm for ideas that change people's lives, and that I think what this is all about.
A reminder to our candidates to stay with the times, or it would have to come out of the closing statements. Our final question tonight comes from Ryan Walsh. It will first be directed toward Martha Coakley.
In the next governor's first term, it is likely that legalizing recreational marijuana will become a ballot question. Do you support legalizing recreational marijuana? And regardless of your stance, after seeing the medical marijuana dispensary application process, do you think that any change is needed for any future application process?
The short answer is I do not support at this time moving towards full legalization of marijuana. I think we've talked about this in the race. I think we all agree. We certainly want to see what happens in Colorado and Washington, in states where they have moved forward. And I do agree that the vetting process and the way in which we've started to move into the medical marijuana dispensary issue has not been ideal. We've spent a lot of time, regardless of how you feel about casinos, in preparing for that, in looking at the industry, in making sure we tightened our laws and our gaming commission. We did not spend the appropriate time, I think, in thinking about this industry, which has also never been had here before, a large cash industry. In fact, there's a huge issue about handling the money of it because it's still illegal at the federal level. I do agree with Dr. Berwick that people who need medical marijuana to ease pain should have access to it, but I certainly want to have tighter oversight on who gets those licenses and how we make sure it doesn't get in the hands of kids or people who are not supposed to have it.
Steve Grossman.
I, too, want to see far more evidence from Colorado and Washington State about what happens when legalization takes place for recreational marijuana. The process by which we have handled medical marijuana has been a fiasco. I mean, 2 years ago, by an overwhelming margin, the people of Massachusetts said we want it because it's good for people who need it, whether it's glaucoma, cancer, whatever it happens to be. So, to me, why would you ever award 20 provisional licenses and then vet the candidates after you award them? Nobody would ever do that. I would never do that in my business, and I don't think anybody else would. So this is a way in which we can understand when government doesn't work effectively, it can create serious problems. I've led the Treasury over the past 4 years. I think I've done it, kept every promise I made, and that is the kind of leadership I offer to the people of Massachusetts as their next governor.
Don Berwick.
We need to have access to marijuana for medical uses. There are patients with nausea and pain that it can't otherwise be controlled. I know that as a physician, and I fully support that. And decriminalization of marijuana is key. Like my colleagues, I would wait to see what happens in Colorado and Washington. We have a 2-year experiment underway. Let's use the results. But the question about the mess in the issuing of contracts in the marijuana dispensaries raises the question again as to who you want in that corner office. Someone who's run for office after office, a politician who goes from one campaign to another and, frankly, one position to another. Or do you want a proven manager, a leader, and someone who has created jobs? I started an organization. I didn't inherit an organization. I started one from zero. And I grew it to worldwide impact with 140 employees, not a single layoff, even during the Great Recession. I understand what it's like to manage properly. That's what I've taught and practiced and learned around in my career, and I want to bring that into the corner office, and I think that's the kind of governor we need.
And that completes our second round of questions. In an order that was predetermined by a drawing, each candidate will now have 1 minute to present a closing statement, and you do have your full times, your full 1 minute. Again, in fairness, I must caution you to please stick to your allotted times. We will hear first from Steve Grossman.
Susan, by the way, I finally figured out that you were asking about safer communities. I had not heard the question, and I do understand it, and I do support it. I'm here tonight to ask for your support. 13 days from now, the voters of Western Mass will have a chance to choose the Democratic nominee. And make no mistake, the voters of Western Mass will make that determination. So I'm asking for your support. I'd also like to address in my last few seconds an issue that we haven't talked about, and that's public education, because I believe that it is absolutely critical that we close the skills gap. There is a skills gap here, and if we can close that skills gap by investing in universal pre-K education, by investing in our vocational technical schools, by investing in our community colleges, by realizing the dream of bringing University of Massachusetts to downtown Springfield, we can give our students and our young people the tools and the skills they need so that everybody who wants a job, needs a job, and deserves a job can have a job. What makes me proud to be a Democrat every day of my life is that as long as there is a single person who lacks a job, who lacks opportunity, who lacks hope, who lacks dignity, our job is not done. That's my definition of social and economic justice.
And that's time.
That's why I'd like to be your governor.
Martha Coakley, you have 1 minute for closing remarks.
So I want to use my minute to talk about something we haven't talked about directly, but does affect many of the things we addressed tonight. I think that in 2015 we should be addressing mental and behavioral health the way we do cardiac and diabetes, cardiac disease and diabetes. I grew up in a family of 5 in Berkshire County. My younger brother, Edward, at age 17, although he was smart and funny and played the piano, showed signs of depression and bipolar disease. And he said, I won't get treatment or take medication because there's a stigma around it. I won't be able to hold a job. And of course, because he didn't get help, he couldn't hold a job or relationships. And very sadly, after my parents died 20 and 22 years ago, 18 years this fall, he took his own life. And I know that our family suffered in silence. I know that there are people, every time I speak about this, who suffer in silence also. And it affects who is homeless. It affects who's in our prisons. It affects who uses opiates. And we can and should do better on addressing mental health and give people the help they need and deserve. I know we can do that here.
We will hear last from Dr. Burr.
Thanks for your time. The stakes in this election could not be higher. We need better schools, lower health care costs. We need real jobs that pay a living wage. We need fairness and justice and compassion driving public policy. We need new leadership, not politics as usual. We Democrats have lost elections when we have nominated traditional politicians, but we have won them and made a real difference in people's lives when we've picked leaders who bring a fresh perspective. I'm not after political responses to problems. I'm after solutions that work. That's what my career has been about. That's what my administration will be about, not political convenience, solutions. On Tuesday, September 9th, you're going to have a real choice. You can choose. You can choose sound bites or sound experience management, old politics or new leadership. Let's make Massachusetts a beacon of good sense, real justice, and compassion. That's who we are. I'm Don Berwick, and I am asking for your vote. Thank you.
And thank you. That completes tonight's 22 News Candidates Debate. I would like to thank the candidates for coming to our studios here in 22 News in Chicopee. Our thanks to our panel of journalists as well, and to our studio audience, who behaved very well. And to you, our viewers. It is our hope that we have helped shed some light on where the candidates stand on the issues important to the people of Western Massachusetts and the greater Commonwealth. There is just under 2 weeks until the primaries. A reminder that 22 News will have complete election coverage primary night, September 9th, and we will have up-to-the-minute results for you after the polls close here on 22 News and online at WWLP.com. Again, thank you and good night.
You've been watching a 22 News Decision 2014 debate with Massachusetts Democratic Gubernatorial candidates Donald Berwick, Martha Coakley, and Stephen Grossman. Stay with 22 News for continuing coverage of this important election season.